Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. Hello and welcome to the program. Good morning and thank you all for joining us. This is Moneyline with Nancy. I am Nancy Naji. Today we're looking at the MPC inflation as well as the economy. So many issues around the economy. President Tinubu would be marking his first day in office in just a few days. Minimum wage issues are also still there. Cost of living crisis and all of that. And I have my guest to weigh in on all of these issues. He's Professor Ken Ife, development economist. Good morning, Prof, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, we have so many things to discuss, so let's get started, and that's why we're really beginning to crunch it now. MPC raised interest rates by 150 basis points on Tuesday. Was that what you expected?
No, I actually expect that they will continue to raise it. There's a point of inflection where it will be unreasonable to raise it, but we haven't come there yet. I can explain. Okay. I can explain that. According to ECOWAS macroeconomic convergence criteria, one of them is single-digit interest rate. The second one is positive real interest rate. So when you look at the lending rates, the MPR rates at where it is compared to inflation, inflation is so far ahead of it. So it means that you're asking people to vote, invest in your country, and then get 10% less the value of their money in 12 months' time. So for two reasons. One reason is the demand pool, domestic demand pool inflation is about money supply. So that is one way of mopping up money supply by continuing to raise the rates. And then of course you see activity at the level of central bank, their open market operation very active, and then also the treasury bills very active. They're all sucking away trillions of naira. But then, secondly, the monetary policy rate will continue to go up as we continue to fight to bring down inflation. So when you get that inflection point, then it now moves into the zone of low positive interest rates. So that's likely to continue.
Did you expect that margin of 150,000?
I actually was expecting 2% was what I was expecting.
Okay.
Because the jump has to be higher at the beginning and start tapering as we begin to see movement on inflation. You see, inflation, we'll talk about inflation again. All indices are still rising, but on a year-to-year basis, but on a month-to-month basis, all indices are coming down. So that is a sign that inflation figure, CPI will start coming down sooner than later.
What would you say about the impact of high interest rates on MSMEs, on manufacturers, and on lending?
It's debilitating. I mean, it crushes. And not only that it crushes, there's also some of the measures may affect, cash injection to the private sector. So, an investment from the private sector. It's both. It affects both.
So how
credit, it affects credit
yes.
to the private sector. It also affects investment. But the fact of the matter is that government is looking at other ways of financing the manufacturers and SMEs other than the traditional central bank intervention, domestic finance intervention. For example, the consumer credit is a method of targeting credit to the private sector. Not necessarily from the bank, not necessarily from central bank, but from other investors.
Yeah, what do you mean by consumer credit? I didn't understand.
Consumer credit is where people who want to be licensed to provide credit are giving that license by central bank to target their credit to the area we need the most, for example, manufacturing. And if I give you an example, if the car manufacturers in Nigeria or assemblers are doing 10,000 cars, then compared to 400,000 being imported from Cotonou every year. Now you can, with consumer credit, targeted consumer credit, you can actually get them to increase from 10,000 to 100,000 cars a year by making sure that those who want to buy a car can just go and put down 10%, and the credit, 90% of the credit will drop to the manufacturer, and they will walk away with the car. They can come back 2 years after and change. And so you've increased consumer consumption of their product. At the same time, you've directed credit to them. That credit could be dollar, it could be naira, But at least if it is dollar, it helps them to pay for the imported raw materials that they're using, imported car assembly. But then the positive effect to the economy is that you've actually displaced 400,000 cars being imported with dollar. I mean, if you are spending $10,000 per car, that is $4 billion you are spending importing those cars. And I'm talking about that's the minimum. But you begin to displace that, so it is a currency gain for us. You are investing in the private sector, manufacturing sector is big gain for us. Employment is benefiting. Consumers are able to buy more. Because if you don't have that, then it's going to be worse.
So who undertakes this cost? Because why I asked that question around consumer credit, good idea. Of course, this is what is obtainable elsewhere. So who does that? Who furnishes?
Well, it is provided by the investors. You give people, like, let me see people who have a lot of money abroad and want to bring them home. Is there a way of enabling them? The diaspora that bring to 6 billion, give some of them, even going out to borrow dollars in the market. So it is about those who have access to those money. And there are some people who have a lot of money that want to put it, you just have to license them to do that lending. And but where the problem is that if that credit flows to consumption side of our balance sheet, that is on other things, then it will be inflationary. It will be inflationary because you are now pouring money into, pouring oil into fire, and that will exacerbate inflation.
So where does credit call? Call me credit call. Credit call that was just launched by the president. That's the consumer credit scheme.
That is what it is.
Where does it now come in?
No, but that is the implementation. These are part of the implementation of the scheme. And the President said it on the day one of his speech. And I keep on reminding the monetary authorities and the fiscal authorities that you need to go to this, so that you can start getting credit flow as the CBN is tapering on domestic financial intervention.
How does that impact inflation?
Inflation, well, you're increasing domestic demand. That is like an investment. It's a big investment because you are now pushing resources where it is needed and where it increases domestic production capacity and it increases production, domestic consumption. So, and it helps GDP as well because not only that it enters into the investment, but it also enters into purchases because remember, the function of total services and goods, and also it helps both inflation, GDP, and then it helps to lower inflation. Because look at, if you are using $4 billion to import in cars, it is a pass-through, inflation pass-through. But here you are not importing them, you are promoting domestic listing, which will not only bring down the prices, but eases the tension in the transport sector. Because more cars and buses can be purchased, and that can help this purchase of CNG cars. So that will, deliver that instead of clogging up the seaport and then cost of importing it and all that stuff. All of them will push inflation up. Here, it will push inflation down.
How do you think that the rate hike of to 26.25% will stabilize the FX market? Is there a stabilization of FX market component there?
You mean in the MPR rate?
Yes.
The MPR rate, as I've told you, there are two things it is chasing. The MPR rate is not chasing dollar as such. It's chasing positive real interest rate, and then it is enabling the sucking away of excess liquidity in the system. Because what it means is that more companies cannot just go and borrow that kind of money at that rate. Because don't forget that is a base rate. Is an interbank lending rate. So banks will put 6 to 10% more on top of that. So which means that banking lending will go over 30%, 30, 32, 35. So it suppresses demand for borrowing.
So how do we handle that trade-off? Because the economic consequences of having higher interest rates in the economy, what do you think would be the economic consequences, and how do we balance?
See, on a normal day, first of all, remember we have stagflation.
Yes, that's
we're not having inflation, and so we have stagflation, which is a complicated type of inflation, where you have stagnation on the economy and even in reverse gear, and then you still have inflation heading up. So that's a very difficult situation. But what you find here is that that measure is not going unattended to, because there are other countermeasures that we're just switching supply of money from central bank through domestic finance intervention to fiscal plus monetary. So you're having other people bringing in their money. It's still investment. So the private sector, MSMEs and manufacturers are still now getting their money, but it is much more targeted, and the risk is transferred to the private sector, both to the lender, to the one bringing it, and also is a transfer of risk rather than that the CBN is bearing it all as it used to be. You know.
Will the MPC hikes bring down inflation? Because I
know
no,
there are other measures. You see, inflation is price, just as MPR rate is price. In every price, there is demand and supply. So when you come to inflation, the inflation is, how do you, manage the supply? Forex, you talked about. Forex is the same thing. How do you bring in more Forex to be able to match the demand for Forex? At the moment, you are having more demand than the supply available. So where we are shoring up the demand for Forex. And that is from what the CBN is doing. It's now gone to the commercial banks to close their net open position and bring it down to 20%. So all those $5 billion they have in their vault, they have to sell them. Then they went and shook down all the informal traders that are holding dollars in the system. And then of course you saw Binance, they're in court now. So they couldn't account for how $26 billion has been moving. So they're going out for those, shaking down and making it unprofitable for many of those who have now resorted to dollarizing the economy and holding dollars as a store of value. And that is what is the biggest challenge that you have. Not even the importers important. The importers are their customers. They come and buy and sell, but they are sitting there just sucking up all the CBN domestic intervention in dollars, those managed float. So they suck them away. So I think those are the measures rather than the MPI rate that are targeted to deal with Forex. And many more measures too, because you've now seen more supply of Forex coming from securitization of our crude oil revenue, securitization of our gas revenue, securitization of more investment coming in, are not resulting from borrowing. Because if we are borrowing with our promissory note, then that causes far more havoc. And then we start asking questions, how are we paying salary? We are not paying salary, borrowing to pay salary. But now government is earning more revenue, about 2 trillion a month, compared to just about 500 billion in the last few years.
What's your forecast about where inflation is going?
Inflation will begin to come down, in my view, maybe around 2-3 months. Because it's already coming down, but it's coming down on month-to-month basis. It's coming down. It is not one or two. All the 5 indices are coming down. So what happens is that while you are
they're still high, but rate of rise is lower.
No, it is the year, because it's measured by year, 12 months.
Year on year.
It is relative to last year, this time last year, that you still seen, it is relative to what happened 12 months ago. But on a month-to-month basis, it's coming down. But it could come down faster. We just have to see. And don't forget, we are in planting season, where people are putting all their money and all their crops on the ground. Again, this is the worst time in terms of inflation that you have a food supply crisis. We already know that food supply is hostage to insecurity and many other factors. But this is why, and if you look at the food supply index, is cruising at 7% over headline inflation for a long time. And even the urban inflation has come beyond core inflation. Core inflation is about 26 or something, and then it's come beyond the CPI, that is the headline inflation, urban inflation. So the sector, the theater where inflation is hottest is in the urban area. That's why the urban inflation is higher than the average CPI, which is headline inflation. But the core inflation remains reasonably around 25 or so. So this is where the target of reduction should be heading to, because core is all indices minus
food.
the volatile food supply and the energy supply. So if you are targeting, that's where you should be, hoping to get to in 2 years' time or something like that.
So if you're targeting that, where does it now leave the fiscal policy? Because the fiscal
fiscal policy that will create more traction at the moment. Because if you look at the 4 components of inflation we are experiencing right now, is cost push. And all that cost push is fiscal. Is the energy price is going up, electricity price, the diesel, the petrol come down now, is going up again, and then and the transport cost, transportation cost. Those are the cost push, making the cost of manufacture extremely expensive, rendering the money useless. Now, you see, you asked me a question about this. It's more important today to suppress inflation, because inflation drives millions of people into poverty, abject poverty, multidimensional poverty. It's inflation. So you must come to terms with inflation, otherwise this labor agitation will continue to increase, because people get pennies and they can't buy anything with it. It's a different story than, oh, we want to get an exchange rate tied up. No, you have to deal with inflation so that people can buy food with the money that they have. Otherwise, they're going to ask you to increase their minimum wage 1,000 times.
So, Prof, keeping rates for longer, of course, in economics could be inimical to economic growth. How do we now handle that trade-off? Trade-off seems to be a very popular word now, because we have higher inflation, we have higher interest rates. Something must give. How do we handle the issue of better growth? Now we are oscillating around 3%.
Sustainable growth.
Better growth,
it has to be sustainable, because you can have growth. Growth can come from borrowing money and bringing it in. It shows that investment, GDP goes high. Talking about what is sustainable.
Prof, okay, let me explain what I mean. Sorry to cut you short. What I mean by better growth is that as we are right now, we are struggling with a growth of about 3%. In the past, we have had growth of 6-7%, yet it was jobless. Now it's worse. Why I mentioned better growth is that for a country that your population growth is even higher than the growth rate, we need better growth. We need higher economic growth rate, and that will actually also take people out of poverty, because when the economy is also expanding, investment is coming in and all of that, people will also get out of poverty. Jobs will be there. That's why I mentioned better growth, not sustainable.
About paper growth that will not put food on your table.
So like the one we had last time?
Yeah. I mean, I remember Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala saying something like that.
6-7%.
Yeah. See, you see, fundamental defect in our economy is that our economy, by design, is an import-dependent economy. That means that your economy is vulnerable to any global headwind. It doesn't matter whether it's health or Ukraine or pandemic or whatever, it doesn't matter, or money crisis, it doesn't matter. You are vulnerable. And that means that you have ignored the role of value addition, because it is the value addition, how you have an agro economy that is about 60%. You are not adding value. So what happens is that you continue to be sliding down. That's what it means. Your economy will continue to slide down on all development indices. You will be sliding down. But when you begin to add value to those, you create jobs at home. If you are importing and importing, you are creating jobs outside, exporting jobs outside. You will never get jobs if you're exporting commodities. If you're exporting agricultural raw materials, your crude, gas, in a natural gas, solid mineral, in crude, forget it. You will not get growth, you will not get employment, because that is not the design to create those things you want. Somebody else is, okay, look, Coco, how can Nigeria, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire provide 72% of world cocoa? But if you look at the cocoa economy, then you see we're only about 7%. How can you 10 times more? You are transferring 10 times more value out there to create jobs there. And you look at the European Economic Partnership Agreement that says, we want 80% of your market, which means they don't even expect you to market and grow and sell to African countries or China or America or all of that. So you can see where we are. It is designed, it's by design. And there are political economy actors that perpetuate that particular status quo.
Now let's talk about GDP rebasing and inflation. That's CPI rebasing. Yesterday I was at a workshop that was conducted by the NBS, National Bureau of Statistics. Of course, it's having a stakeholder engagement on issues around GDP rebasing and CPI rebasing. If we are supposed to be right, if we are supposed to be doing what we're doing, we should be rebasing every 5 years. The last one we did was in 2014. Now it's like 10 years. Is this a good time to rebase?
No, it should be done every 5 years. Because I remember, I know how many times I was, screaming about rebasing in 2012 until it was now done. Because the last time it was done was 1990 something, 1992 or something like that. So it was done, and I was adamant that you were going to get not less than 60% increase in the GDP, and it was 59, 60%. Now, this time round, it can go up, it can go down. Rebasing can actually go up or go down. But what happens is that in rebasing, you're beginning to look at some other emerging economic parameters. Because, for example, when we did that in 2014 or something, we didn't have this agency banking sprout everywhere. Now they are going to be taken into account.
We have a lot of digital
the digital infrastructure are here. Performance, we have 6 unicorns, which are homegrown companies that are $1 billion in value. We have all that. We have millions of people sitting under umbrella and transacting. That's going to be captured. You have of course, we are doing better now with our Nollywood. And then you see, so all of these areas are coming, and the central bank has licensed many companies, payment infrastructure and payment services companies. So all of those will be picked up and captured. A lot of more e-learning, but all these will be captured in the new dispensation to see where the transactions are happening, the volumes that are there. Nigeria is number 3 in the world. It was number 6 3 years ago. But we are number 3, about number 6, now about number 3 in the number of electronic transactions. You couldn't even believe that when we were number 6, America was like number 10 below. Nigeria was doing 1.8 billion transactions a year. America was doing 1.2 billion. Japan was doing, Brazil, we were well ahead of those. Now, all these, our target is 2 trillion, 3 trillion transactions. All these are money that are going to come. That can be captured in transactions. Then in terms of inflation, also, inflation is done in baskets. So some of those baskets on food, baskets on consumer, all these baskets, they may widen, and some more could emerge, and some would be more de-emphasized. Because when you identify all of them in this basket, you also have weights that you attach to them in the calculation. So all of those will be looked at, and the variables and weights and all of that will change. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But there will be substantial changes.
Do you see a change around perhaps what happened during the unemployment recalibration?
Oh, no.
Where now we have unemployment rate of about 5%.
Well, but now unemployment, nobody talks about unemployment anymore.
This has been a subject of debate. Even yesterday in the room, a lot of professors were there, other stakeholders were there and saying, MBS, you could rebase CPI now, and you're telling us that inflation now is 10% or 9%. How do we handle that? The political leaders will say, okay, we brought it down. You understand this. So how should that be handled?
Well, the thing is this. What MBS is doing is applying more and more international standards, because the ILO is the international agency that sets the standards on unemployment measurement and criteria. So they fully implemented that. And I'm sure they are also going to fully implement whatever standards that are going to be affected in inflation. And I know that World Bank worked with NBS during that time to support them to build their capacity. So that's some of the things we are going to see. But as I said, we have to keenly watch how it goes. But definitely there may be shock at what was being reported as 20, I don't know, 30-something, 33% or something like that.
Inflation
may suddenly come down to 20.
33.69.
But it might also go up. That's the thing. How do you explain how Argentina has 300% inflation? So you don't know. You have to see how it goes.
Because even yesterday at the workshop, it was mentioned that the survey was also small, perhaps 600.
Yeah, the sample
sample
size
Yeah, sample
may
size.
be an issue. Because the thing is that, there are standard deviations that you use. There's a formula for calculating the sample size. And statistically, I would think that they probably need twice more than the sample size they are currently using. Because the degree of confidence, which is 95%, 98%, the higher you go, the more sample that you require to give you a higher degree of confidence. I mean, if you want 100% degree of confidence, then you have to survey 220 million Nigerians if you want to get 100%.
And definitely you can't do that.
You can't do that. But as you begin to come down from 100% to 98% to 95%, the requirement for sample is reduced. But also, if you have wider variety of baskets, then also you may need more samples, because you're going to divide them among those baskets. And then you're also going to cover every 774 wards in the country and states and all of that. So there will be more to really increase the sample size, as well as sectors and subsectors that are going to be picked up.
What impacts will perhaps a GDP rebasing do for poverty and employment?
The rebasing is just an arithmetic.
Yes, just to give us the structure of
it's an arithmetic.
How the economy
the rebasing doesn't go to the farm to produce more food or give you more palliatives to help those. It's just to understand how these parameters affect the figures that will turn out. But in the end of the day, it is about how we plant more food, and then more efficiency in doing that, and more effectiveness in the policy framework that enables us to do this.
Exactly. That's why I also asked the question. Eventually, when the economy is rebased, it gives policymakers, a full eye view of how the economy is structured, as to where interventions are needed, or where policies that will kickstart or even continue reforms in some sectors, as well as even foreign investors. Because when they are now watching the Nigerian economy, like, okay, this is where the action is, this is where we need help. That was why and that could actually also impact, in a way, provision of jobs and all of that.
Well, if they still commit their money, you see, one thing is for the foreign investors to see good figures and all of that. But if the figure on insecurity doesn't improve, people are not going to borrow money to come and die in your country, or invest, and they are set ablaze. So that's a limiting factor. Insecurity has to be tackled decisively. It needs a decisive blow, because that keeps holding people back. And of course, I hear what I read the German Africa strategy, where they were saying that information asymmetry was also somehow contributory to people feeling reluctant to invest in Africa. So some of those will be corrected, because what the people see, how true what they see is, the metrics that they are using to value us, and then value our economic performance. Some of them need to change. So, and I'll be talking with them next Monday when they come.
Okay. One more question on this rebasing. If the rebate, of course, as we are now, we are the biggest economy on the African continent. I'm not sure again. That's why I'm a bit hesitant.
You see, in Naira GDP terms, yes, we are. See, Nigeria is a $1 trillion economy. That, without a doubt, our GDP purchasing power parity is $1.2 trillion. That is what Nigeria is. And it remains the #1 in Africa in terms of PPP, that is GDP purchasing power parity, $1.2 trillion. But what you see, because it's based on the notional value of dollar and the value of your economy, but where do you see that get played out is that your Naira GDP value, which keeps going up anyway, but you have to divide it by the exchange rates. So when you divide it by exchange rate, that is 1,004 something. Let's say when it was 1,900, call almost 2,000, then it will be small. It will be over 200 billion. When you divide it by 1,000, it becomes about 400 billion. When you divide it by 500 naira to $1, it becomes 800
So if you have a stronger currency, it will definitely
absolutely. So on paper, just as the currency is changing and bringing down, your GDP is going up. As it's coming down, you can see the number running. In 2014, December, we had a GDP of $573 billion. 21st biggest company in the world. Yes. Just one step to our Vision 2020 target. But then shortly after that, the thing dropped to 300 million.
You know why I'm laughing? When you talk about Vision 2020, I discussed development plans yesterday on the show. Oh. That's why I'm smiling. That the issue of the Vision 2020 came up while my guest was here, Professor Sylvester Amoyi. Now, if we're talking about GDP, I said one last question. Does it mean we're a richer country? Prof, are we really a rich country?
No, see.
Or we're a rich country with poor people? Poor country?
First of all, look, listen. Nigeria is by far the richest country in the continent.
Richest apart from, in what terms?
Look at, we have 44 solid minerals, none of which is contributing anything to our economy.
So richest
we have the biggest gas reserves of over 200 trillion cubic feet of gas. We have crude. I mean, we have it. It's all in, and then 60% of our economy is agrarian. And look at the whole belt. ECOWAS is 450 million people. We're about 60% of that. In the terms of industrial capacity, we're over 80% of that. This is a rich country, but it's powering below its potential.
So rich potentially.
Power. Okay, I've given you the example now. Yeah. You are the assessment.
But we're not taking that to the bank, Prof.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
That is not yielding us money, because if you're talking of rich,
Nigerian GDP purchasing power parity is $1.2 trillion. That is what the world sees as the size of Nigerian economy. But where are you? The real GDP, the one that you see, is about 300. It's not even up to 400 now. So you can see the gap. We are 60% below our capacity. We are powering below our capacity.
That's why I asked you that question, if we're still indeed a rich country. Because when you're talking about rich countries, you're talking of people.
We're a resource-rich country. So the resources are there on the ground. So now look at what the government is doing now, which I quite like actually. It's now shifting from debt financing to asset-based financing, which means you've seen them saying that the House of Rep wants to investigate hundreds of thousands or whatever, thousands of government collapse something. We are now moving to say, if you want to do business, come here, we'll securitize the capacity, we'll securitize the crude for the next 5 years, we'll securitize the gas revenue, and then we've, India and want to do something, 14.something billion, focus people on your assets so that you can generate that income and then make them work for that. And then you stop harassing your balance sheet by going to issue promissory notes to borrow this, borrow that. So that is the fundamental shift. That's what this Ministry of Finance Incorporated represents. Is moving us away from this whole scandal called loan by promissory notes.
Let's talk about minimum wage. Labor worked out. I think private sector is saying 57,000 naira. Government came in, federal government came in, I think, with 48 or so. Labor is saying 615. Where does it leave us?
There is a science around minimum wage computations. There's a science around it. And that science looks at a real living wage. It looks at the potential transport allowance to workers that are involved. It could also look at transport costs, how you attenuate the high cost of transport by buying thousands of CNG vehicles and all of that to reduce that absolute cost. It also possibly looks at, if there's any other allowance. But many countries, their wage is indexed in one way or the other. For example, one of these indexes is inflation linked. So, and that is why those countries keep their inflation low. Because if inflation goes high to 10%, wage will go up by 10%. If it goes to 15%, wage will go up by 15%. So that's why it tends to be indexed on inflation. Now, we have a runaway inflation. And we have a target to bring it down. So, and also we have Fiscal Responsibility Act that gives us medium-term expenditure framework, 3-year rolling plan. So why don't we look at wage in terms of a 3-year rolling plan, where we said, okay, we are starting today. Let's say if we are starting by 100,000 minimum wage, next year we are going to use that inflation of 30 to bring it to 130 or 33. The following year, we are bringing that inflation to about 20%. We will use only 20% to come. So in a period of that 3-year rolling plan, we will be getting inflation where it should be, and then the salaries will move. People will understand that than everybody's on his own calculating anything that don't have any common basis for the calculation. That's the only thing I want to say about this.
I think I'm understanding what you're saying. So, of course, even at the argument of labor is that they're looking at the cost of living crisis as well as inflation.
But the cost of living, the metrics is inflation. The key metrics is inflation. So what happens is that if you have that index link, then you can compensate by saying, okay, let's give them transport allowance, 10% of their wage. Now let's give housing allowance, 10% of the wage. Now let's bring down this whole transport cost by having 10,000 lorries this year. Next year, we'll reduce it to 5,000. The other year is only 1,000. So, and then let's have more palliatives to compensate. So you now have 4 things that are working to help bring down the pressure on the worker, rather than the way it's going, because I can't see the science behind what they're doing.
Tinubu will soon be 1 year in office, just a few days away. What are your views? How has the president fared? Now,
first of all, we're all looking. Everybody's looking. The whole performance management is in the court of public opinion, and we're watching them on the television. But what I will say to you is this. 12 months ago, how I would describe Nigeria is it was a sick country, really, really sick, and on the intensive unit. Then they pushed that sick bed in intensive unit to a cliff where it was likely to drop. And I don't know how deep that cliff is. So it was that point when they came in, and then suddenly, till now, 12 months now, that it has come off that cliff. The country has come out of intensive unit, and the country is in a recovery position. Many things are happening all at the same time. There are so many balls in the air.
There's inflation, there's cost of living crisis, everything has...
You asked me the question.
Yes, I know, Prof. But I'm putting a
You asked me the question.
Yes.
There are so many balls in the air. And when you have so many balls in the air, the picture, there may be unintended consequences, because there are so many balls in the air all at the same time. So there are unintended consequences. And one of those consequences is my heart bleeds when I go into the market. I go to market to buy it. I can't buy it. I get angry and I walk away. Because I take 100,000 naira into the shop. My trolley is not full. I go to the ordinary market. I feel hungry. It's not what I saw last week that I'm seeing this week. So, my heart bleeds. And my heart bleeds because of the people who are working and earning 30,000.
Because that's how the people also judge the government.
30,000 can't cook soup and stew in one day. You won't. For a family of 4. It's tough. It's very, very tough. But if you ask me, can I see light at the end of the tunnel? My answer would be yes.
Where is that light?
There's a light in the end of... I've given you one example. The inflation relative to what it was 12 months ago is still showing, rise, but month to month is going down. All indices, if it is only 2 indices, I would say, I don't know, I'm not sure about that. All indices are pointing down in the month to month. So what you are saying is that how long would that continue? And then you've seen results, significant results. You saw influx of some currencies coming in, and then some lending is coming in as well, consumer lending. So there are some monies coming in. The diaspora is, the CBN is working on how to double the money coming in from diaspora. It's working. So there are so many work in progress that are convergent in the direction of change. So I think we should see that. But it's not something that numbers would. You have to have palliatives going on to cushion effect. You have to have all these other considerations, as I mentioned before, in computing what that minimum wage is. But productivity is the answer, because you can pay any wage you like. If you are not producing, and we are not holding down the price of this consumption and all this food, it won't change anything.
What future policy recommendations are you positing to address these economic challenges as this administration gets to 1 year and going into the 2nd year? Because I've also heard government officials say 1 year is too short to judge us and all of that. I'm like, come on, guys. You were the ones that campaigned for this. You said the economy was bad, a lot of Nigerians are suffering and all of that. So don't tell me 1 year, because we know that even 1 day is a lot of time to change a lot of things. So what do you think? What are like 2-3 recommendations that you would give to this administration?
There are many recommendations.
Give me 3 out of them.
There are many things. First, we needed to get the food that is critical. We need to get it. And there are very clear measures that you can take, which is about value addition. Because that creates the employment, that gives you more food, and that gives you more capacity. That gives you things you can export and get more revenue outside of the oil. We've talked about insecurity. If you don't secure the country, secure the people who have money will not even invest. Our own people, domestic investment, will not even put money in. Why will you expect somebody from outside to come and invest in your country? So, people, we won't make the traction. We won't get the traction that we need without security, as it affects investment. Then, of course, about the inflation we've talked about. Central bank is doing a lot of things on that inflation, but the forces that it has to contend is incredible, is mammoth. But at least you saw that money move down from 1,900 to 1,100, and it is creeping back. But then again, it tries to come down again. It's a work in progress. But at least you see the measures day by day.
People are saying to the central bank, take us to where you even took us from. From early this year, 7-something. Take us back to that place first.
It's work in progress. That's all I can tell you. It's work in progress.
Okay. Prof, I think we'll leave it at that. We've had...
Well, and you asked me, I gave you 3.
Okay,
but I'll take the 4th one. Okay. Actually, the white man told us to build schools. But what we should be building is skills. I'm not saying you shouldn't build schools. But the way I tell you that is, if you go to America, America has 2,600 universities. That's all right. It's at the high echelon. It produces for the world, yes. But you go to Germany, and then that's why you see big business. But you go to Germany, you see them, it's about skills. And that is where SMEs are built and done.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof, for coming. I've been speaking with Professor Kenny, a development economist. We've been talking about MPC, inflation and the economy, and of course, President Tinubu will soon be 1 year in office. Let's take a few seconds break. We'll be right back to run you through what's happening in the news. Vice President Kashim Shettima has revealed that President Bola Tinubu has secured potential investments worth more than $20 billion in the last 1 year. The VP said the potential investments secured by Tinubu included $14 billion from India and $15 million from the Netherlands. He also mentioned the recent $500 million for lithium development, among others. The federal government has announced the start of construction on Section 3 of the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway, starting from Calabar, and Section 4 from Akwa Ibom, pending the completion of the procurement process. The Minister of Steel Development, Shuaibu Aldu, has said that the light section mill of Ajaokuta Steel will, upon completion, supply about 400,000 metric tons of iron rods to the Ministry of Works for road construction across the country. Aldo added that with a seed capital of 35 billion naira from a private financial institution, the president has approved the restart of the light section mill. Moving over to the central bank now, it has further explained the new licensing requirements for bureau de change operators, stating that the new guidelines incorporate feedback gotten from the public earlier this year. Acting Director of Corporate Communications Department of the CBN, Hakama Sidi Ali, explained that the new guidelines introduce a 2-tier licensing system for BDCs. The process for reapplication will start on June 3, 2024. The NNPC Limited the Nigerian National Petroleum Company New Energies Limited, in partnership with AYM Shafa Energy and Nigos International Investment Limited, have signed a pact to establish electric vehicle charging centers across the country. The managing director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company New Energies Limited, Kanayo Odua, stated the partnership will deepen the drive for clean energy. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Energy Services Limited and Schlumberger have signed a technical partnership agreement towards boosting upstream operations. The Chief Corporate Communications Officer of the NNPC Limited, Olufemi Shoneye, stated in a statement that the agreement is part of strategic reforms aimed at unlocking opportunities in the country's oil and gas sector. The African Development Bank has announced an investment of $1.44 billion to support the development of energy and power, transport, water, and sanitation infrastructure in Nigeria. The bank's Nigeria Country Department Director General Lamin Baro made this known at the Nasarawa Investment Summit. The National Bureau of Statistics has said that there has been an upward trend in the life expectancy of both males and females in Nigeria from 2020 to 2022. The report covered 6 key policy domains: population health, education, employment, power, and decision-making in governance, and violence against women, as well as crime. The report said that life expectancy of females in 2020 was 56 years. It has increased to 56.9 years in 2021 and 57.2 years in 2022. Life expectancy for males in 2022 was at 54.6 years. It increased to 54.8 years in 2021 and 55.1 in 2022. The Group of 7 finance meeting began in Italy late on Thursday, with G7 finance ministers and central bank governors expected to discuss global economic trends, financial support for Ukraine, and multilateral development banking. The National Bureau of Statistics is moving towards rebasing and including more items and incorporating more sectors in determining the country's consumer price index and GDP. This will include the digitalization of price data collection and incorporating prices on e-commerce platforms, among others. The NBS disclosed this as a stakeholder sensitization workshop on rebasing Nigeria's CPI and GDP.
There's no state that is compiling GDP now in isolation. They must come to MBS to work together so that we ensure that whatever figure that we are arriving at is consistent with what we have at the national. There are some components of the computation that cut across all the states, that no one state can lay claim to that sector. So we have the national figure for which we can decompose it with some indicators across the state. So no state can do that on their own without input from MPS. So we are working with them to ensure that there is that consistency. Metadata availability. We are going to also be, with this rebase now, give us an opportunity to change the way we share data or bring data out, especially for prices. The weight for each of the item, the code and programming that we use, and then the raw data. So I think we are working towards that to be able to do that, to achieve transparency and credit.
All right, that's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. Thank you all for joining us. I'll be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji by now. Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.